bipartisan.
Hey, welcome to the OC Politics Show.
Keeping politics bipartisan, local, and on the level.
Love live. Welcome to the OC Politics Show, and I'm talking over my own introduction stuff. My name is Todd DeVoe. I'm your host, and this is our co-host,
Joe Matthews.
And Joe and I are here today talking to the Libertarian candidate for president, and I'm so excited to have her in at the studio, or into the green room, if you will, our virtual studio. And it's exciting because I think this is a time where I know we are a local politics show, but in this case here, presidential politics obviously are going to have an impact on, especially during these times. This is very strange times here in the United States, and we have some great questions. And Dr. Joe, welcome to the show.
Oh, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, Dr. Joe, just want to let you know that there's a lot of people that are, and as you probably well know, that are just kind of frustrated with either party, and they're looking for an alternative. And I just respect you a lot, just because you're sticking yourself out there and you are making yourself known. And the Libertarian Party has been around for a long time, but I think this is an opportunity for the Libertarian Party to get a lot of exposure, especially what's going on today. Gary Johnson was a presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party in 2012, 2016, and he said that the Libertarian Party was more culturally liberal than Democrats and more fiscally conservative than Republicans. Where are we at right now in 2020 with the Libertarian Party?
Well, I really don't like to compare us to Democrats or Republicans because, first of all, they are so far gone. And I used to do that maybe in the 80s when it looked like there might be some hope. But what we have now is we have Republicans who are nowhere near being fiscally conservative. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We had an outsider come in to be president. And I understand why all the people voted for Trump, because they wanted something different. They wanted somebody who wasn't a politician, somebody who would actually make government smaller. He said he would get rid of the deficit, and instead the deficit has gone up. And with the Democrats, they are traditionally the party of peace, the anti-war party, the people who want free speech, and now they're the opposite. In fact, if you look, Tulsi Gabbard was about the only anti-war person up there trying to get the nomination, and the party pretty much shut her down. And if you look, they nominated Hillary Clinton, who's pretty much a war hawk. So, and we can see that free speech is nowhere near the Democratic Party. So I just see these as two old dinosaurs of political parties who are pretty much doing everything wrong. And the good thing is that's what American voters are thinking too.
Absolutely. So along that lines, what do you think somebody who's looking for an alternate, right? So I don't say everybody, people are really upset with the fact that, there's a two-party system, if you will. You see that the enrollment in both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are going down, but yet we still seem to see the only way we can get people on debates, it's a fixed system, if you will. The two parties get together and decide who's going to be on the debate stage. How do we break through that type of thing to be able to get the libertarian message out to everybody?
Well, it's tough because even though it's our political system, the debate commission is considered a private entity. And basically, if they don't want us in the debates, they can keep us out. So when you look, wherever there's money and power, people want to keep that money and power, and they will do whatever they can. And what's ironic is that so many people realize that a monopoly is not the way to go, that when you have a monopoly, that people aren't interested in your opinions, they're not trying to please you. And we have a two-party monopoly system where we've got the Democrats and Republicans who are basically in charge, and there's not a lot we can do. So what we're trying to do is grow the party. and grow the movement. And what's so exciting for my campaign is we have so many people who are volunteering, who are not party members. And that's quite unusual to have so many non-party volunteers at this stage in the game when we just started.
That's awesome. Joe, are you back? Nope, not yet. So, along those lines, and I know that, especially in today's climate, right? I mean, we're watching the George Floyd riots and protests, and I like to separate the two of them. I think that they're definitely two different prongs. And then this weekend, another African American was shot at the hands of a white police officer, and that circumstance is a little bit different, and we'll get into that if you want to. But I know that on your platform, criminal justice reform is one of your planks. Tell me a little bit about what your plans would be today if you were in charge of the United States. What would you have your attorney general doing, and what is your plans for criminal justice reform?
Well, first of all, I completely agree with you that the protesters and the rioters, two different prongs. I think that these rioters are basically hijacking what is a constitutional right to have your voice heard, to protest, and it's just tragic. Now, when we look at the escalation, I would point to the federal government as one of the reasons that we have the escalation, because we've militarized local police departments. If you look, all crime is local, and the response to that crime should be local. So robbery, assault, burglary, all those happen to individuals, and we need to allow each individual police department to take control or to take care of that, not the federal government. We shouldn't have the federal government involved. And what the federal government has done is has given the local police departments free tanks, grenade launchers, and then you can have, here's more money for additional free stuff, we'll give you free training. And of course, which police department is going to say, oh, no, we don't want free stuff? You know, they look at it as, hey, our taxpayer dollars went to pay for that. You know, we're going to take it. We don't want some other city or some other state to get it. So without the federal government, giving them all that equipment, we wouldn't have such escalation, because you know that police departments wouldn't have tanks on their own. If you ask the local people, hey, we're going to have a referendum, and do you want to spend money on a new school, or do you want a new tank for the police department? I think most people would say, I'd rather my taxpayers go to improving the school, not paying for a new tank. So that's the only reason that we're in this position.
And just for everybody to be clear, when you're talking about tanks, you're talking about armored personnel carriers, not the ones that could.
Well, I sometimes I speak in hyperbole, although I have actually heard of tanks being out there, but who knows? But the point is that the local police now feel as though they're more of a paramilitary, more like soldiers, as opposed to a police department. And a police department should be what we see on the cop cars: serve and protect. They should be out talking to communities. They should be building rapport, not feeling like they're soldiers. Because if you think about it, soldiers have an us versus them quality and a war quality, as opposed to serve and protect, that's got a much more community-oriented feeling. And I don't want to be at war with other countries, and I certainly don't want to be at war with my own citizens.
Absolutely. So Joseph's back. All right.
Hey, I'm back. Yeah. Sorry about that. I wanted a different seat. So my question is real simple. We're in the middle of a pandemic, as you know, and when it's all over, hopefully soon, we have an economy that's suffering. And I'm curious about the Libertarian Party. What will the Libertarian Party do to get us out of this situation?
Out of the situation we're in?
Well, yes. I mean, we're going to be in a situation where we have high unemployment. People are out of work. They're not feeling too good about the current economic situation. What is the message of the Libertarian Party?
The message of the Libertarian Party is that you can spend your own money better than bureaucrats can. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the power out of special interests, lobbyists, and bureaucrats and give it back to where it belongs, with the people. Nobody ever spends somebody else's money as well as they spend their own. And what we want, for instance, with the coronavirus, instead of shutting down the economy, we say people should be allowed to work if they want, and they should be able to work, should be able to work for who they want to work with, and so forth. And so by keeping it local, by having people earn the paycheck, let them help the small local companies that are in such dire consequences. You mentioned the economy specifically. If you look at some of the larger corporations like Amazon and Walmart online, their sales are actually up from last year, January to March, whereas small business is down. So, and once again, who's the government bailing out? And they're saying, well, we have to bail out the airlines because we need air travel. Well, the airplanes are not going to disappear. Perhaps the people who were in charge of them before didn't do a good enough job, and we need competition to see if anybody can do a better job. But what we don't want is politicians deciding exactly where the money should go, because it usually goes to their friends.
Okay. Thank you. I was on your Facebook page, and yesterday you acknowledged the 4th anniversary of the Pulse nightclub tragedy, the mass shooting. And I want to know, I know you know the answer to that. I'm going to ask you why you did that. And I also want to know what the Libertarian Party stance is on the healthcare for the LGBTQ community.
Well, once again, the free market has served the LGBTQ community far better than the federal government has. Just to give you an example, the Walt Disney World was actually giving benefits to spouses, to partners of their gay employees, whereas it took the federal government something like 20 years later before they said, yes, this is something that should be done. Because when we have employers competing for the best employees, if they narrow their range to such a small number, then they're going to get worse employees. Well, I hate to say worse employees, but it's not going to be competitive. And to give you an example, I worked for IBM when I first got my MBA. And back at that time, it was pretty much a male-dominated industry. And yet my first year, the national rookie of the year, the previous year, was a woman. And in my region, the rookie of the year was a Black man from Guyana. And again, if IBM had discriminated, if they had only hired white males, then they wouldn't have gotten these 2 excellent employees. However, under the government, you can discriminate. And the one example I like to point to, because a lot of people don't know the rest of the story, is the story about Rosa Parks. A lot of people know that she's the heroic woman who refused to sit in the back of the bus when she was told to. What a lot of people don't realize is that bus was a government-owned, government-run bus. And the government was able to discriminate like that because there are no consequences. Now, if we put it in today's terms, let's say Uber or Lyft, they decided to discriminate against their best customers. Now, I'd like to point out something like 60% of the bus ridership at the time were Blacks. And so what if Uber were to discriminate against the best 60% of their customers? They would go out of business, as well they should. And with healthcare is already highly regulated, and doctors aren't competing. In fact, if you look at the 2 fields in which there is the most competition, which, by the way, is LASIK surgery and cosmetic surgery, you see prices going down, quality going up, because they have to compete for people's dollars. And so what I would like to see is the rest of the medical field have to compete as well, rather than be protected by a government monopoly.
Okay. So I have another question for you. You were recently quoted in the Washington Times that both Trump and Biden are tainted on race. And so can you expand on that and share what your party has to offer as far as race relations?
Yeah, if you look, well, I gave you an example of the just the government's response and how they had institutionalized racism. A lot of people don't realize that we've had institutionalized racism in our government ever since the slaves were freed. And it's because that's the only way that people in power could compete. If we look at both Joe Biden and and Donald Trump, they're both powerful people who basically have the system working for them. But to go back when the slaves were freed, the slaves were offering excellent quality. They were very good craftsmen because they were the ones who were doing all the work. So just like most people, when they go into business, they were offering their services for a lower price. And by the way, that's what I did when I went into business for myself. I offered lower prices so people would try out my company. And the whites at the time, their reaction was, oh my gosh, well, how do we compete against that? Well, what they should have done is they should have offered even lower prices and better quality, but they didn't. Instead, they used the force of government behind them to create Jim Crow laws and to have an advantage. And we've just had that advantage built into the system that we haven't even seen. We had redlining with real estate beginning of the 1900s, in which basically Blacks were pretty much told, okay, you can't live here. So we just have a long history of it.
So I just want to go back to Biden. I mean, how would you separate yourself from Biden as far as race relations? It's obvious Trump has made his ways clear, but Biden seems like kind of elusive in a way when you go back to the past. How would we make it clear to people that we need to worry about it?
Well, first of all, just the fact that he takes, let's go back to, and I've used the term monopolistic a couple times. You look at Joe Biden feels that he is entitled to Black votes. He when talking with Charlemagne the God, he was saying something like, well, if you're, I would question if you're Black, if you're not going to vote for a Democrat. They have basically taken for granted that population as though they're going to get them no matter how much they abuse them, no matter what they do to them. And I'd like to point along something that's very interesting. Somebody had done research, and this may have been like 10, 20 years ago, when they looked at who Blacks voted for when it came to party voting, they tended to vote overwhelmingly Democrat. However, when there were referendums on the ballot, for instance, do we want to spend money here? Do we want to spend money there? When they actually get to vote on the issue, Blacks are very free market when they vote. So they understand that government is not going to, government's not their friend, and that they don't want to put more money into the system. And yet when it comes to voting party, they're voting Democratic. And we've got people like Joe Biden who are just beyond entitled and who are taking them for granted completely and not in their best interest.
Dr. Joe, quick follow-up on that. If you take a look at some of the images of the Libertarian Party, and what I mean by that is like at the conferences, at things like this, it seems to be pretty monochromatic, right? I'm not saying that it is, but that's what the images look like. How do we encourage more African Americans and other minorities to get involved with the libertarian cause?
By spreading the message. And I think that now, as you know, we've got a gender gap, that we've traditionally had a gender gap in our party, and that's closing. And I'm just so excited that so many women are coming on board, hearing my message. And even within the Libertarian Party, I had a lot of male libertarians say that after hearing my message, their wives, girlfriends, whoever were joining the party because now it was being more inclusive. But I would like to point out quickly that our party has tried to be the party of inclusivity from the beginning. In fact, a lot of people don't realize that Obama and Hillary in 2012 were both against gay marriage, whereas the Libertarian Party has been for gay marriage since the 1970s. However, our party basically did not a good job of marketing, and we're trying to fix that. And I think that my campaign is an example of this, in that we're getting a lot of non-libertarians signing up. So we just need to go out there and show how we are the party who includes everybody, and we've always included everybody. And it's been difficult in the past, and one of the reasons why our party has not had the diversity that you mentioned, is that we're not mentioned in the media as often, that we have to break through that. But now with social media, we are able to do that. And so we are able to reach people. And a lot of people now with Joe Biden are seeing, well, gosh, maybe I should look somewhere else. And I'd like to point out real quick, if you look at Joe Biden, who's clearly saying, hey, if you're Black, I don't have to work for your vote. You need to come vote for me anyway, because that's what you do.
Right.
And Trump, who came in as an outsider, saying, I'm going to reduce government because I'm an outsider. I'm going to reduce the deficit, and he's increasing it. I would say to all the Republican voters who voted for him, you didn't get what you wanted with him either. So take a look at us.
So piggybacking on our last topic, the social justice system, I mean, we talk about, it just seems ad nauseum we hear that same statistic that, it's that prisons are just proportionate to Blacks and minorities. And so for the Libertarian Party, where would you start if you had all the control there?
Well, first of all, if you look at drug laws, you will see that people of color are much more likely to be arrested to begin with. And what's even worse is that it's inherent in the system. For instance, if you look at prison terms for drugs that whites typically use, they have less prison time, lower prison sentences than drugs that people of color tend to use. So we've got racism built right into the system. So what we would do is we would go in and get rid of these laws and point out to people that it's the prohibition that's causing the problem, not just the use, or rather that the prohibition is causing more problems than the use. If we look at alcohol prohibition, for instance, what did we get? Organized crime. We got peaceful people coming in contact with criminals, and move that to today. When's the last time you heard of a liquor store owner trying to push gin onto high school, college seniors, in school? When's the last time you heard of a vodka addict breaking into somebody's house because he couldn't afford his vodka habit? Or when's the last time you heard two liquor store owners having gunfire with each other because somebody was encroaching on his territory? I mean, all of these are associated with the prohibition, not the drugs themselves. Mm-hmm. So getting rid of that is a huge part of it. And again, we wouldn't be federalizing the police. We would allow the communities to handle it, and it would be much more much more community oriented. Now, let me quickly add, of course, if somebody's rights are being violated, the federal government does need to step in. And the federal government was right to step in when George Wallace stood on those steps and prevented Blacks from entering into the school. But that's not where we are now. So what we're having is the federal government escalating police matters, getting involved before they should be. And getting involved before there even is a problem by doing all this funding.
Yeah, I was reading an article about the Libertarian Party of 40 years ago about your stance on police brutality. You talk about, not selling yourself. You sound like back then you were ahead of your time with your stances on individual freedom and the way police were acting even back then.
Yes, it's so frustrating. And I remember somebody literally laughing at me in the 80s when I suggested that the government is probably going to start taxing junk food because the government controls every aspect. And they laughed at me. Oh, junk food, how silly. Not only is junk food taxed more than other foods in some areas, but now you've got Mayor Bloomberg outright outlawing large glasses of soda. So it's even worse than we thought. And yeah, I try not to dwell on that, but you're right. If you look back in libertarian literature, so many things that we predicted have come true, because that's what happens when people have power. When people have power, they tend to throw it around, and that's what we need to curtail.
Dr. Joe, I know that you had us until you're kind of hitting your hard wall, but do you have a few more minutes to stay with us?
Sure, I've got about 5, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Joseph.
Doug, do you have a question? Because I have one if you want. If you
No,
want.
yeah, go ahead. I want you to go ahead and finish.
Well, you were vice presidential candidate in 96,
Yes.
and now you are bravely stepping into probably one of the most politically contentious battles that we'll ever see, probably in our generation. So I want to know why it's personal for you. Tell me about Dr. Joe and her personal reasons for doing it.
One of the things is I read Animal Farm when I was in grade school. Excuse me. And I see that happening everywhere. In fact, some interviewers have asked me, so I guess you ran for student council, or maybe you were student body president in high school, college. No, I hated that because I never liked the idea of a few elite people at the top making rules for everybody. I was always very anti-political, and now it's just a matter of self-defense. I look at voting libertarian as an act of self-defense. If we look, we had a corrupt Congress, 30s, 40s, the Congress was very corrupt, but most people didn't care because government wasn't in every area of our life. But nowadays, if you want prayer in your school and your next door neighbor doesn't, you got to go to the ballot box and you got to vote, and you got to vote against your neighbor in order to get the kind of schooling you want. Education or healthcare. If you want the kind of healthcare you want, you got to go to the ballot box because you got to vote for what you want. And what the Libertarian Party would like to see is a world in which we each get to make our own decisions, in which there are different schools competing for different people, so that you can have prayer in your school where somebody else doesn't have to have prayer in their school. If you want this kind of healthcare, you can have it. You don't have to be in a one size fits all. We're hearing Medicare for all. Whenever I hear Medicare for all, I hear VA hospital for all. So I see it as very passionate that people should be able to make their own decisions and not have the special interests make their own decisions. So I would like to mention, if anybody's interested in this, you can please go to joj2020.com. Again, that's joj2020.com. And we are just so ecstatically overwhelmed that so many non-libertarian volunteers are joining our campaign, as I mentioned, and also to please vote libertarian.
Can you, if people are interested in donating to you, can they donate?
Oh, I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now? I think
you wanted to,
yeah.
Now wants to know about donating to your campaign. What do you need to do? Can you hear me? Did we lose her?
Oh, I think we lost Dr. Joe. Shoot. Oh man. Dr. Joe, can you hear us now?
Can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't hear the program anymore.
Okay. We'll wrap up. Thank you so much for being on the show. And we want to know, we're going to have your links down below. So if these people want to go on there, and can they donate on your website? So that's the question.
Okay. Yes, please go to my website. And there are different rules in different areas. And so I usually say to come check us out, because some places I'm not allowed to do that. But absolutely, if you believe that you have the right to make your own decisions, and if you don't want to see your money go to Washington and let them spend it on their special interests, please, we need your help so that we can advertise and so that we can build the movement and hopefully be on the debate stage. So if you would, go to joj2020.com and please donate to help the cause. We would really appreciate it. So, and thank you so much for having me on the show. This was great.
Our pleasure. And I'm sorry that you can't hear us anymore. We can still hear you, so we're good. And we'll have you on again sometime. So please, the door's always open for you. Joe, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. You sound beautiful. I missed Dr. Joe already.
Man, I know. I missed Dr. Joe too.
I keep on talking.
That was great. I could, I know she had to go, and unfortunately, with technology, sometimes these things happen, and it's kind of a bummer that those last few seconds of her time got cut short due to technology.
She's still in the green room?
That's good. She can still hear us, hopefully.
Okay.
All right. So Joe, I mean, this is your first taste, obviously, of libertarianism.
There's
you know,
more similarities than differences, my friend.
yeah, I mean, we've had this conversation a lot and about the libertarian movement, and we're gonna try to get we have the invitations out, by the way, everybody, to both the Biden campaign and the Trump campaign. I don't think that we're a big enough fish in the pond for them to even consider coming on these shows, but we've asked them to come on. Sent the emails, and they sent the contact us, the media request forms. Haven't really heard much back from them outside of the fact that they're looking into it, and we everybody's super busy or whatever. What I think is kind of cool about Dr. Joe coming on the show is that she is grassroots. What do you think about that, Joe?
Well, I've never met the woman before till today, and I felt like she was very sincere about what she believes in, and she's willing to talk about it day and night for months and months and months until it's all over.
What do you think that we should do as, I don't want to say the people, because like the election, the presidential election commission, whatever that thing is, where they decide who gets to be on the stage for the debates. For years, the complaint has been, it's two parties. They have the Democrats and Republicans that are both running it. They make the rules to shut off any kind of third party, whether it's libertarian or green or peace and freedom or whatever third party that's out there. They set the rules to where you need to have, it used to be 2%, right? And then with Ron Paul running, they got up to 3%. And when Gary Johnson was running, again, they got up to like 3 or 4%. And so they say on the polls, you need to be at, now they want it like at 4 or 5%. I forget what it is off the top of my head, to be able to get it on stage. And they keep raising that bar for the third party candidates. Do you think the system is fixed?
Yeah, for a two-party system. These people are talking to each other all the time, every day, both sides to each other. And Joe is not there.
Right.
Joe's not there for those conversations. No one's asking her for her opinion. And that's the big difference,
Right. And the reason why I think that this year specifically, and with the presidential election, and why are we talking about it with what we have deemed here that the OC Politics show hyperlocal, and the local politics matter more than to us on a daily basis than the federal election. In this case here, with the call nationwide for law enforcement reform, with defunding the police department, with the reduction in federal funds going to law enforcement, these battles that are happening now with congressional delegations asking for defunding federal money going to the police departments and so forth. That means it's actually defunding the people who are patrolling your street every day. And what does that mean for it? And, take a look at, talk about defunding. You take a look at some of the things. Baltimore specifically pulled back on their law enforcement officers, made it more of a no longer proactive policing. It's reactive policing. There's areas in Baltimore where law enforcement will not patrol unless 911 is called, and crime in those areas have gone up. And now the residents of Baltimore are asking City Hall to increase patrols in those areas where just a couple of years ago they said they didn't want police over there. So I know that the people are fickle and they kind of go back and forth on this stuff here. But if we start having federal reduction in law enforcement, what does that mean to the local police departments? And I think that's a question that we're going to have to cross when it comes. And I think although going into what Dr. Joe is saying, it seems like a lot of these issues have come since we've had the war on drugs, since we've militarized, in her terms, the police department with using armed personnel carriers that from the federal government, using those funds, and with the rules, right? Federal forfeiture, for instance, which made it really lucrative to go ahead and bust people, and take their stuff, and then they have to fight for it to prove that they were innocent, which
The
is really,
rise, the
right.
rise of the warrior police officer.
Yeah.
There's
So
an interesting book out there called "The Rise of the Warrior Police Officer."
well, man, this was definitely an interesting conversation today with Dr. Joe. And what's and again, I'm going back to you a little bit now. What do you think? What's your opinion on how the federal government at the presidential level will impact local government in the next couple of years with all the stuff that's going on nationally with the protests?
I think people are going to start paying more attention to who they're electing, because I think the pandemic has been a great teacher. I think someone named Donald Trump has been a great teacher of when things don't go the way they should go, way we expect them to go. We believe in the myth of America and all the bells and whistles that come with it. And these things that have happened lately, the pandemic, the Trump era, has really made people rise up, start doing their homework, question their political parties, jump from their political parties. I used to be a Democrat, and I was raised a Republican, and now I'm an independent that just might vote Libertarian. So that's where I think that's where I'm at, and I know there's a lot of people just like me.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I have I was pretty much raised a Republican, and I've left that stream and have moved into independent, because I don't think either party, in my mind, is doing justice to anybody, and except for themselves, right? And it seems to be that what's the old quote? Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I'm butchering the crap out of that quote, but
That was pretty good. I believe you.
Thanks, Joe.
First.
Thanks, Joe. All right, I know we're running a little bit late, a little bit over, so I think that we're gonna start wrapping this up. Joe, any final words before we put that to go music on?
Just a great opportunity to meet someone with a different bent on the world, and they're in a place of power, and hopefully we can expand their influence, and hopefully people will give her a shot. Just listen to her and give her the opportunity that she gave us today.
Everybody, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for working through our technical issues that we're having. We're always still learning, and we're trying to text back and forth to each other, keep the show moving smoothly. It's a lot of fun. You get to see a little bit behind the curtain, and Maestro, send us away.